The Appalachian Mountains don't make noise unless something's moving. People hike them every year and come back with stories they can't explain. Footsteps with no source, voices where no one should be, shapes that stay just far enough away to doubt what you saw. Tonight, these are 3 true encounters from the Appalachians, and every person involved left earlier than they planned. I grew up in Western Ohio, where the woods are flat and familiar, and you can usually tell what's making a sound just by listening long enough. My girlfriend Hannah grew up the same way, so when we planned a winter vacation to the Appalachian Mountains, it felt exciting more than intimidating. We wanted snow, quiet, and a break from everything that felt predictable. We chose a small mountain town tucked deep into the range, the kind of place with one main road, a general store, and miles of forest in every direction. The day we arrived, snow was already falling, soft and steady, coating the trees and muting everything else. It felt peaceful in a way we weren't used to. That afternoon, we went for a walk along a marked trail not far from the lodge we were staying at. It wasn't late, and there were other cars parked near the trailhead, so we weren't worried. The forest was dense, branches heavy with snow, and every sound felt close, because the cold air carried it so clearly. That's when we started hearing footsteps. At first, I assumed it was another hiker somewhere behind us. The sound was faint, but rhythmic, slow crunches in the snow, stopping when we stopped, starting again when we moved. I remember joking about it, saying we were setting the pace for someone else. But after a while, it stopped lining up. We'd pause, listening, and nothing would move. Then when we took a few more steps, the crunching would start again, not behind us exactly, but off to the side. Too far to be on the trail, too close to ignore. Hannah squeezed my arm and whispered my name. I could tell by her voice that she wasn't joking anymore. We kept walking faster now, and that's when I saw something between the trees. It was far enough away that my brain struggled to focus on it. Just a tall shape, darker than the forest around it, standing still among the snow-covered trunks. It didn't look like a deer, and it didn't move like a person. There was no clear outline, just the sense that something was there, watching from a distance, where it couldn't quite be identified. I stopped walking without meaning to. Hannah followed my gaze, and I felt her grip tighten. "I don't like that," she said quietly. The shape didn't move closer. It didn't move at all, and somehow that made it worse. I couldn't tell if it was standing upright or leaning, if it had limbs, or was just shadow and branches playing tricks on us. I only knew I'd never seen anything like it before, and I didn't want to get any closer. We turned around and headed back the way we came, not running, but not slow either. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see if the shape had moved. That night we stayed in a small camper-style lodge, one of several scattered along the edge of the woods. It was warm inside, quiet except for the wind brushing against the walls. We tried to laugh it off, telling ourselves it was probably another hiker or an animal distorted by snowfall and bad light. But neither of us slept easily. Every time the wind gusted harder, I'd wake up, convinced I'd heard, a movement outside. Hannah barely slept at all. She kept saying she felt like we'd been noticed, not threatened exactly, just observed. Sometime before dawn, I finally drifted off. We left early the next morning. The snow had stopped overnight, leaving the ground smooth and untouched around the lodge. As I loaded the car, Hannah stood frozen near the door, staring at the ground. There were footprints in the snow. They circled the lodge once, slow and deliberate, before leading back toward the tree line. They were about the size of a human foot, maybe boots, maybe not. The snow around them was packed down hard, like whoever made them had stood still in a few places. I couldn't tell if they belonged to a hiker who'd wandered too close, or to whatever we'd seen between the trees the day before. We didn't stay to find out. I live alone, and for the most part, I like it that way. The only constant company I have is my dog, a mixed breed mutt named Cole, who's been with me for nearly 8 years. He's calm, well-trained, and almost unnervingly unreactive to wildlife. Deer, raccoons, coyotes, none of them ever bothered him much. That's why what happened in the Appalachian Mountain still sits wrong with me. I took Cole on a solo hiking trip through a remote section of the range, staying in a small rented cabin several miles from the nearest town. I'd hiked the area before, always during daylight, always without incident. This time I planned a longer stay. Quiet days, long walks, no phone signal. The first evening, just before sunset, I took Cole out on a familiar trail that cut deeper into the woods behind the cabin. Snow hadn't fallen yet, but the ground was frozen and brittle underfoot. Every sound carried farther than it should have. About 20 minutes in, Cole stopped. Not slowed down, not hesitated. He stopped completely, ears forward, body stiff. I followed his line of sight, expecting to see a deer crossing the trail. There was nothing there. I tried calling him forward. He didn't respond. Instead, a low sound came from his throat. Not a growl, but something closer to confusion. Fear, maybe. Then I heard it. Footsteps, not on the trail, off to the right, somewhere between the trees. Slow, careful. Each step spaced out like whoever, or whatever, was walking didn't want to be heard. I called out, assuming it was another hiker. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet. The footsteps stopped immediately. Cole whined and tried to pull back toward the cabin. That's when I saw movement ahead of us. Not crossing the trail, not approaching, just pacing parallel, barely visible through the trees. I could see something tall shifting between trunks, keeping the same distance no matter how slowly I walked. I never saw a face, never saw limbs clearly, just the impression of a shape that didn't belong to any animal I knew. I turned around. The footsteps followed. They didn't rush me. They didn't get closer. They stayed exactly far enough away that I could still pretend I was imagining them. Cole kept glancing over his shoulder, whining louder with each step. By the time the cabin came into view, my hands were shaking. I locked the door behind us and turned every light on. Cole stayed pressed against my legs, staring at the windows, hackles raised. I didn't sleep much that night. Around 2 a.m., I heard something walk around the cabin once. Slow steps, crunching against frozen dirt, stopping briefly near the door before moving on. The next morning, I found tracks. They weren't clear enough to identify. Too distorted. Too deep in places. They circled the cabin the same way the sound had, then disappeared into the woods. I packed up and left that morning. Cole didn't relax until we were miles away. He still doesn't like forests that feel too quiet. I was hiking alone on a well-marked Appalachian trail in late autumn, the kind that's busy in summer but almost empty once the cold sets in. The weather was clear, quiet, and still enough that every sound felt magnified. About an hour in, I noticed something odd on the side of the path. A pair of hiking boots. They were laid neatly beside the trail, toes pointing toward the woods, like someone had stepped out of them on purpose. No backpack, no jacket, no footprints leading away that I could see, just boots sitting there in the dirt and leaves. I stood there longer than I should have, trying to come up with a normal explanation. Maybe someone changed footwear, maybe it was a prank. But the longer I looked, the more wrong it felt to leave them behind. That's when I heard screaming. It was distant far enough away that I couldn't tell which direction it was coming from, but unmistakably a man's voice. Not yelling words, just raw, panicked screaming that rose and fell, then cut off, abruptly. The forest went silent again. I didn't shout back. I didn't move forward. My hands were shaking as I pulled my phone out and called the authorities, stumbling over my words while trying to explain where I was and what I'd heard. I left the trail shortly after, heart racing the entire walk back. Later, I learned there had been reports of a hiker who'd lost his mind somewhere in that area. People said he'd been acting erratically, possibly on drugs, screaming and running through the woods before disappearing for hours. They found him eventually, but I still think about those boots and how calmly they'd been placed there every time I hear a forest go completely quiet. Most people don't talk about what they experience in the Appalachians. They just leave and don't go back. If these encounters felt a little too real, subscribe. More stories like this are coming. And if there's another video on your screen right now, click it, because whatever people run into out there doesn't always stay in the mountains.